The street was filled with chaotic zombies, and the sounds of gunfire and exploding shells rang out. A man standing above looked down with an ashen face. He was deeply worried and impatient. Below, all manner of terrifying zombie monsters roamed, yet he nonchalantly went into the room to hurriedly add sugar to his cup of coffee. The laptop in the room had a video game blaring, paying no heed to the terrified screams. The young man continued to sip his coffee and play the game in total comfort. He even warned his teammates over the headset that the girlfriend sitting next to him might bite his private parts. The blonde player who was gaming with our protagonist in red jokingly replied, "No way that's going to happen." Unbeknownst to him, a girl was sitting at his feet. He was very excited and cheerful. She was making her boyfriend happy, but when she opened her mouth, he was petrified. Her mouth had turned into a monster. Screams rose elsewhere, while here the protagonist calmly kept pushing the turret to try to win the game. Finally victorious, the young man took off his headset and breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly, a loud voice called from outside, and he turned to pay attention. At the door stood a beautiful girl, begging him for help because there were so many zombies and monsters outside. But the protagonist promised to help her on one condition. The girl blushed and immediately agreed, trying to look attractive in front of him. Suddenly, a beam of light swept across unexpectedly. He was the young man who used a knife to butcher and split the girl in two. Her head fell off, and the system announced that eliminating a potential zombie grants 1 point. Then he mercilessly slammed the door shut. His real name was Lin Fan. He was an ordinary interior designer. Until one day, everything in his life suddenly changed. He kindly helped a girl, only to discover she was a monster and bit his neck. Just as he was near death, a system appeared before him. The Apocalypse Survival System, Zombie Connection Successful. Then he was reborn back to the moment he was killed, with his physique and strength at level 10 and everything else at 0. At that point, after opening the system following his killing of one zombie, he realized that every monster he killed granted him 1 point. Outside, a monster with a deformed head was eating the girl's corpse from earlier. At that moment, Lin Fan opened the door and stepped out. The monster noticed him. It stuck out its tongue and opened its mouth wide, lunging to attack him. But Lin Fan simply chopped off its head with one stroke to confirm whether the system would actually award him points. The system immediately added 1 point. Although those he killed were his neighbors, Lin Fan could do nothing else because he had to protect himself. After a while, Lin Fan had killed a slew of zombies. They lay scattered in front of his door, and the system's counter kept climbing. Suddenly, the corpse of his neighbor Vai Vai, whom he had killed, was nowhere to be found. Lin Fan could only guess that Vai Vai had been eaten clean. There wasn't a scrap of meat left. Then he looked over the pile of corpses he'd created and complained about the cleanup. If left too long, his room would reek. So Lin Fan took a large rope and tied them all together in one place. He dragged the pile of corpses over to the big garbage heap. Suddenly, a strange noise came from ahead of him. He looked forward and saw the silhouette of someone in a wheelchair. The man in the wheelchair stepped into view. He was a monster, his back covered in clusters of large eyes, his mouth crowded with long red tongues, and his jagged teeth looked revolting. The wheelchair-bound zombie immediately stood up and attacked Lin Fan. He realized it was Uncle Yang from the second-floor downstairs unit, then casually delivered a slash that sent him to the afterlife. After he died, Lin Fan seemed to realize something and said, "So you wanted to give me your wheelchair, didn't you?" He then used the wheelchair to pile the zombie corpses onto for easier transport, even promising the corpse he'd return it properly after he was done. Sure enough, the wheelchair was left in front of room 203's door after Lin Fan finished. He stood before the pile of corpses at the big dumpster, deep in thought, unable to believe the apocalypse had really happened. Right now, Lin Fan was very troubled by the ever-growing number of corpses, because he didn't know how to recycle them. And there was no one here who was a normal person he could discuss options with. At that thought, Lin Fan suddenly noticed the sound of people behind him. A man standing on the upper floor waved down at Lin Fan. He immediately recognized him as Uncle Joe's son, and that he was an addict. Lin Fan had been bullied by him before and even had his bicycle stolen. Although the thief returned it after Lin Fan reported him to the police, the next day he beat Lin Fan senseless. At that moment, Lin Fan put on a wary expression toward him and asked, "What's the matter?" Uncle Joe's son was surprised that Lin Fan dared to speak up and wasn't afraid of the zombies coming to eat him. Then he took out a piece of paper and wrote. He wrote clearly in his notebook, ordering Lin Fan to quickly fetch food and drink and bring them to his door, saying it with a challenging look directed at Lin Fan. Of course, Lin Fan flatly refused in front of him. He was furious and blurted out, "How dare you?" Then he wrote another line in the notebook, saying that if Lin Fan obeyed him, he would let him stay with him and, when the opportunity arose, take him away from here because he knew of a secret base. Even with such a tempting offer, Lin Fan still flatly refused. Uncle Joe's son went red with anger. He crushed the page in his hand, cursed Lin Fan, and began to seethe with hatred. Then suddenly he snapped, throwing bowls and plates at Lin Fan and shouting that if Lin Fan wanted to die, he'd make it happen. But his aim was poor. None of the bowls or plates hit Lin Fan. The loud noise attracted a horde of zombies. It turned out that was his intention. The bald guy laughed triumphantly and taunted Lin Fan. But unexpectedly, down here Lin Fan's few chops made the zombies' heads fall one after another, and the system kept notifying him that points were being added. Seeing this, Joe's son was terrified. Then he gleefully shouted, pointing at the largest mutated zombie standing near Lin Fan and continuing to taunt him, saying he should die, that although he was skilled, there was another one, and how dare he defy his orders. Unexpectedly, Lin Fan picked that zombie up and headed toward the man's apartment. He forcefully threw the zombie onto the bald man's balcony. Lin Fan shouted loudly that he was giving it to him. The zombie lunged in front of the man. He panicked and cried out in shock, asking, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" Seconds later, he was hugging the very zombie he had been terrified of, and an oppressive silence fell. In the alley, Joe's son's screams rang out. Lin Fan pedaled off and told him to talk to that zombie if he had anything to say, since he was busy. A little while later, the system at the Shoe-Ike supermarket announced, "Kill one zombie, get 1 point." Inside the supermarket, system messages kept adding +1, +1. Lin Fan went to the checkout, handed a bag of food to the supermarket's zombie owner, and pretended he wanted to pay. Outside, Lin Fan looked at his large knife and began to figure that maybe he should find a suitable place to farm later so he could gradually become self-sufficient. To do that, he'd need a sturdier blade than the one he had now. Suddenly, he noticed something nearby. Near where he stood, a bus was approaching. The bus drove right up to the area near Lin Fan's house. It was barreling along at breakneck speed, with countless zombies frantically chasing after it. The bus was hurtling toward Lin Fan. He was dazzled by the vehicle's headlights. The light streaming from the vehicle brought back painful childhood memories. His stepmother furiously berating his father, threatening to kick him out of the house at any moment, while his father desperately tried to find someone to take him in. Back then, Lin Fan was deeply hurt to hear such words. When he burst into tears, his aunt snapped at him, "I can't stand the sight of you. What are you crying for? Why don't you just die and make me happy?" In a rage, she turned to where his father was driving and caused a commotion, demanding he pull over to talk. Unexpectedly, in that moment of lost control, a car from the opposite direction came barreling toward them. Lin Fan's eyes went blank and tears welled up as he stared ahead. The family's car collided with a large bus. The accident was horrific and violent. Back in the present, the bus driven by a young man pulled up near him. Someone on board called down, "Hey kids, do you want to get on?" But he didn't answer. The man on the bus laughed excitedly and said, "If you don't get on, stay down there and let the zombies tear your guts out." Lin Fan still didn't say anything. He stood there dazed for a long while. There was another young man on the vehicle. He looked gentle and turned to ask the driver, "You're really not going to let him on? The teacher said we must help others after all." Before the gentle young man could finish his sentence, the driver spun around, grabbed a sharp object, and stabbed him in the neck. Then mercilessly, he shoved the bespectacled young man hard, sending him tumbling onto the road. With a cruel expression, he said, "If you're going to be that kind, I'll send you down there to join the other one." Having said that, he slammed the accelerator and the bus sped off. The bespectacled young man nearly lost his life. Looking in the rearview mirror, he could still see Lin Fan standing there, motionless. The bus driver began to wonder whether he really dared to stand there alone and face the horde of zombies chasing them. He sneered, thinking Lin Fan was a madman. At that moment, Lin Fan seemed to be in psychological shock. He stood there muttering to himself, "Die, no, I won't die." Then he recalled the happy memories of his childhood with his kind birth mother. She had told him to grow up to be an honest, good person. Lin Fan leaned forward and readied his arm to throw the knife. He told himself, "I promised my mother I will become that kind of person." He hurled the knife with all his strength. It streaked swiftly through the air. Then it lodged straight into the bus's tire. The vehicle was speeding when a force suddenly struck a wheel. It lost control and crashed. The man inside the vehicle was pinned under the bus up to his torso, crying out in hopeless pain. At that moment, Lin Fan pedaled up on his bicycle. The man in the vehicle begged him to save him. "Save me, I'm really at fault, I won't do it again." Sitting on his bicycle, Lin Fan said calmly, It's not that you know you're wrong, it's that you're about to die, you're just scared. Then Lin Fan broke into a cheerful, mysterious smile and said, "Ah, right, your friend is about to find you. I'm leaving now, here's to never meeting again." Having done that, Lin Fan rode off, leaving the arrogant man who had just pleaded for help behind, shouting in vain. Just as he turned away, a zombie with a mangled, ruined face let out a roar and lunged at his face. Then a terrifying horde of zombies swarmed in, pressing against one another and fighting over every morsel of the bus driver's flesh. Lin Fan's bicycle wheels continued to roll steadily. He rode alone along the deserted street, and at that moment, a system notification announced that his power had increased to 35 and his speed stat was 10. Lin Fan passed a building where a woman on an upper floor waved down and called, "Hey, young man, wait a moment." At the window there was also a little girl. They looked at him in puzzlement, wondering why Lin Fan would dare to pass through an intersection so full of zombies. Lin Fan turned coldly and asked what was wrong. He thought the child looked faint from hunger. A few minutes later, Lin Fan arrived at the woman's apartment with the child. The mother knelt before him and begged for some food, saying they hadn't had anything to eat for days and the baby was very weak. Then Lin Fan immediately handed food to the woman and said, "Then I'll sell you 2 pumpkins and a winter melon." The woman was very surprised, not understanding why he would need money at a time like this, but she didn't dare say anything. Suddenly Lin Fan noticed something in front of him. It was a sword displayed in the woman's home. He stared at it and blurted out, "Oh, wait a moment." Seeing Lin Fan so interested in the sword, the woman took it down and handed it to him, saying it belonged to her husband. He was a big gamer and had bought it, and if he liked it, she could give it to him. It was obvious from Lin Fan's face that he liked it. He seized the sword and, acting embarrassed, said, "How can I accept this?" The woman laughed it off and replied, "It's fine. We don't need it anyway. You can take it." Lin Fan happily took the sword and ran off. He bade the mother and child farewell and promised that if anything came up they should contact him and he would be ready to help. Lin Fan unexpectedly got hold of a sword and was very satisfied with it. In fact, he had wanted one for a long time but hadn't had the money to buy it. As he was rejoicing, someone suddenly fell right behind him, and nearby there was a loud shout, "You bitch, drop dead." A pink-haired woman, her body covered in bruises and blood, fell onto the street, coughed up blood on the spot, and landed right in front of Lin Fan. Also nearby, the one who caused the woman's death was a big, fat man. He was up on a high floor, looking very irritated. He took a drag on a cigarette and looked down with regret, because in times like these, he didn't know how long it would be before he could find another beautiful woman like her as a replacement. Looking at the pitiful woman before him, Lin Fan guessed she had been abused for a very long time. Moreover, the look in her eyes before she died showed a heartbreaking mix of helplessness and fury. Seeing the twisted corpse before him, Lin Fan felt a familiar echo of his mother before she passed. She had looked at his father with that same gaze. Angry, Lin Fan looked up and asked the man above, "Hey, why did you do that?" Startled, the man looked down at Lin Fan below, surprised and taken aback that anyone would dare walk the street. Standing on the high floor, he shouted down, "Who the hell are you? You're not a resident here. This is my territory. The women here, I play with whoever I want. You have no right to stop me." Hearing those words, Lin Fan paid them no mind. He sat down beside the woman, intending to do something about that bastard. Otherwise, the mother and child from earlier could have been in danger. Then Lin Fan carried the woman upstairs and stared up at the 5th floor where that man was. He, being unreasonable, turned and shouted, then spat some filthy words. "You bringing a corpse home? I'm telling you, that corpse can't move. It's not as satisfying as an inflatable doll anymore." Then the lunatic turned back in, put on a vicious expression and cursed, "While I'm not yet angry, you better get out of here, or I'll make sure you never see this world again." The bastard went straight into the apartment, pulled out a can and drank, muttering in annoyance. Afterward, he even planned to wander the building later to find women and satisfy his urges. Since it was basically an apocalyptic situation now, he felt free to do whatever he wanted. While he was enjoying himself in the room, someone suddenly knocked on the door. He startled and looked out. He then went over to the door and called out, "Who's there?" At that moment, the fat man didn't hurry to open the door. He was annoyed, suspecting there might be a zombie outside and frustrated that if there were zombies, his plan to grab women couldn't go ahead. But when he looked through the peephole, what he saw was the face of the woman he had just killed. He recoiled in shock and fell flat on his back. Lin Fan had brought the woman's corpse right to his room. He knocked on the door and called out, "Open up, I know you're in there." Hearing Lin Fan's voice, the man finally breathed a sigh of relief, convinced it wasn't a killer. He yelled for him to go away. "Get lost. Are you out of your mind, or do you want to walk straight into death? Inside, he was deliberately shouting loudly to lure zombies to the room to attack Lin Fan, so he wouldn't have to lift a finger and Lin Fan would still die. But unlucky for him, Lin Fan was very strong. From outside, he kicked the door with such force that it fell off and smashed straight into the man. At that moment, the perverted man stared at Lin Fan in astonishment, wondering if he was even human to be that strong. Our protagonist scanned the pervert's house and was shocked by the 18+ devices inside. Could he have used those things to torture the woman? Lin Fan carefully placed her body right next to the door while the pervert's shouts grew louder. "Get out of here! Why are you bringing a corpse into my house?" Lin Fan turned around, visibly furious, radiating a terrifying murderous aura. He said, "Of course I brought her here so you can witness the day you pay for this." A short while later at the police station, the pervert had been captured by Lin Fan. His hands and feet were tightly bound, and his mouth gagged with a device. Lin Fan carefully tied a rope around him and dragged him like a dog. As he walked, he said, "I'm taking you to the police station." The pervert kept babbling as he dragged his heavy body down the road, cursing at him and asking, "Have you ever watched zombie movies or read zombie novels?" Lin Fan turned and replied curtly, "I've seen them." The man then erupted into loud curses. "If you've seen them, you should know what the apocalypse is like and what needs to be done. Don't you think it's really satisfying to do whatever you want?" Hearing that, Lin Fan slapped the pervert hard. "Novels are novels, can't you tell the difference? Don't bring that stuff into real life," he snapped. The pervert remained indignant at being tormented by Lin Fan. "The apocalypse has come and I still have to be taken to the police station. What a lunatic." Although there was no one at the police station, Lin Fan still threw the pervert straight inside. He cast a wary glance back at Lin Fan. How could he be so strong? Earlier he had kicked through my anti-theft door and now one shove could have seriously injured me. Being treated like a criminal by Lin Fan, he angrily shouted, "You crazy bastard, why did you bring me here? I told you it's the apocalypse. There's no one left here to deal with this." Suddenly, Lin Fan's face broke into a mysterious smile. "No, you're wrong. There are people here." By then, the pervert strongly sensed a murderous intent right behind him. Numerous red eyes appeared in the darkness. The zombies, the police from inside, surged out and attacked the pervert. Lin Fan shouted loudly, "Look, even if the police have become zombies, they're still here to punish those who commit crimes." The next day at Huangshi Library, people could be heard distributing supplies to others to fight the zombies. A middle-aged man sitting in a vehicle turned and said, "Don't worry, be careful, everyone." He assigned tasks to 3 young people, 2 men and a beautiful woman. The woman, addressing the 2 men who were with her, reminded them to focus on the immediate mission, find the medical books and don't get distracted. The 3 of them quickly moved to the main entrance. An observer reported that there were no zombies inside. They were about to go in when the woman spoke up, "Hold on." She struck the door forcefully with the sickle in her hand. The man in the blue shirt said then, "Boss, it's very safe," and the man beside him confidently added, "You're being overly cautious." At that moment, the boss flung the door open, then decisively ordered the 2 to go find where the medical books were shelved in the library. Just then, our Lin Fan appeared. He waved at the 3 of them in a friendly manner. The man following the boss was so startled he nearly fainted. "Oh my god, zombies can talk too." Seeing everyone panic, Lin Fan quickly explained that he wasn't a zombie. The woman also cautiously asked him what he was doing here. Lin Fan was holding a book, an encyclopedia on vegetable cultivation, and said he had come to read. After all, what else is a library for? The man wearing a hat whispered into the leader's ear that the boy had a point and that her earlier question had been unnecessary. The leader angrily snapped for him to shut up. Then she politely told Lin Fan that they meant no harm and asked him to forgive them if they'd bothered him. Lin Fan didn't pay much attention. He waved his hand and said it was nothing. One of the leader's group noticed the sword on Lin Fan's back and said he was odd. Who in an apocalypse would carry that toy sword? The other man, a bit wary, quietly asked if anyone thought this might be a trap. Then the leader strode forward and instructed her 2 subordinates. In short, act silently and don't let any conflict break out here. She was looking for the book she needed, but when she glanced at Lin Fan, she felt uneasy. Something about him made her think he wasn't someone to mess with. She decided to find her book first and leave to be safe. After finding what she needed, the leader waved her hand and dismissed the 2 men. As they were about to leave, Lin Fan turned to the 3 of them and called out for them to wait. The 2 men were now on guard, readying themselves for a sudden attack. What is he planning to do to us? No wonder this guy's got issues. The boss, however, stayed calm and asked, "Did you call us for something?" Lin Fan went blank for a moment and then said bluntly, "You girls have taken too many books, you need to register them. If these books aren't being borrowed by individuals, they must be registered." Lin Fan's remark left the three of them frozen on the spot. The two at the back whispered to each other, "Which psychiatric hospital is he from? Is this kid out of his mind? What era is this that you still have to register to take library books?" Seeing Lin Fan's attitude, the boss probed, "Do you know what's happening outside right now?" She thought to herself that she'd heard her teammates, but she still couldn't believe there was anything wrong with him. Lin Fan replied nonchalantly, "Of course I know. It's the apocalypse. There are zombies biting people. Aside from that, there's no major incident." Hearing his answer, the boss's mind filled with question marks. She stammered, "Are you sure?" Then one of her subordinates lunged forward and said bluntly to him, "Do you even know what's going on outside, or have you been scared silly by the apocalypse? Fine, you think what you want, we'll handle our business. No one interferes with anyone else, everyone take care of themselves." Hearing this, Lin Fan politely signaled that he didn't want to cause trouble during the apocalypse, and he introduced himself, saying he lived in Building 2, Apartment 704 in the Yangguan complex. He even boasted that he was very strong and told them to come to him if they ran into trouble. He was willing to help and claimed he could kill 108 zombies at once. After hearing that, the three of them were stunned again. None of them could utter a word. After that, Lin Fan truly frightened them. The three turned and ran off quickly, shouting, "Thanks, if we need anything we'll come find you." Their leader inwardly screamed in fear, "This guy really isn't normal." Lin Fan called after them in disappointment, "Why are you running so fast? I haven't even asked your names yet." He then returned to carefully reading the farming manual he'd found, muttering to himself that he'd better focus on studying to carry out his immediate plan and make the most of his time. The scene shifts to an underground base beneath some desert. The people here are collecting experimental samples from the zombie creatures. Two men are talking here. They're trying to extract specimens from the zombie monsters to see if any antibodies exist that can counter the zombie virus. But the older man is certain it's impossible to find such an antibody. They've never found one, not even anything similar. The elderly scientist asked the man beside him, "Do you know about the Jiangshi's genes?" The man next to him turned and replied, "Do you mean that zombies are actually the dead brought back to life and survive in a different form?" After researching gardening in the library, Lin Fan went to the grounds near his apartment complex. He felt this was a suitable place to grow things. Lin Fan stood there looking out and imagining his future. Then he gathered all his strength and shouted loudly, "Is anyone here? If so, please respond. I'm here alone. I'm Lin Fan, living in apartment 704. Immediately, his frantic shouting drew a group of zombies to the area. To ensure his planting area wouldn't be overrun by zombies, he focused on eliminating these ones first. Then more and more zombies swarmed in, and Lin Fan drew his sword and took a stance. A system notification appeared, continuously awarding points to Lin Fan. He had slashed through many zombies in this area. After clearing the scattered zombies here, he stood alone, looked around, and breathed a sigh of relief. "Okay, when I plant crops here, zombies won't come to disturb them." Then Lin Fan continued shouting loudly to attract more zombies and to make sure there were no ordinary people around. That also eased his worry that the vegetables he planted might be stolen. A moment later, Lin Fan's stomach growled loudly and continuously. He told himself to find something to eat and to drop by the mother and daughter house he had helped the day before to see how they were doing. A short while later, Lin Fan arrived at the mother and daughter house from the day before. They cooked for him using the groceries he had brought from the nearby supermarket. At this point, the woman felt she could trust Lin Fan and politely hinted that she wanted to rely on him. Her husband was already dead, and with only her and her daughter left to depend on one another, she feared something might go wrong. Lin Fan still didn't grasp her meaning. While eating, he asked again, "Do you need any help from me?" Hearing that, the woman was surprised and thought to herself that she hadn't expected him to agree so easily. Her face flushed, she closed her eyes and, forcing herself to sound decisive, said aloud to him, "My daughter and I want to come with you." But Lin Fan, naively and as if oblivious, replied enthusiastically, "Oh, so you want to move to the area where I live, right? That's fine, the rents there are very cheap. If you'd like, I'll find a broker for you." Hearing this, the woman was stunned. She felt shaken and thought to herself, "What is this? Are we even talking about the same thing?" Cut to a scene near Lin Fan's apartment complex. A group of people from a real estate brokerage were gathered here. The man in the white shirt suddenly received a phone call. He picked up the phone. The person on the other end was Lin Fan. "Hello, Mr. Chen, about the house you sold through the Tan Feng agency. I wanted to ask you something. Could I rent it?" Old Chen turned bright red with anger when he heard that. He slammed the phone down and cursed. Who in their right mind would be calling to ask about renting a room at a time like this? Are you blind? Can't you see what's going on outside? After that, old Chen leaned back against the wall, staring up at the sky in a daze. The apocalypse had come so suddenly. If it weren't that their building was an upscale complex, making it hard for zombies to break in, they wouldn't have survived. For the past few days, everyone had stayed on the roof, hoping some rescue force would arrive, but not a single soul had shown up. Suddenly, old Chen's phone began ringing again and again. He picked it up and looked at it with annoyance. This time he didn't bother with a polite hello and cursed straight away. Are you crazy? Lin Fan, however, replied calmly, what's wrong with you? I just want to rent the house. After that, old Chen hung up without saying anything more. Lin Fan sighed and stared at his phone, complaining, people are really strange these days. Fine, I'll just call him a few more times. So Lin Fan did call old Chen a few more times, but all he heard were Chen's curses through the line. What do you want, you bastard? Lin Fan, still calm and innocent, replied, I only want to rent the place. Old Chen shouted angrily into the phone, fine, fine, I'll rent it to you, go ahead and rent it. I'm on the rooftop of building number 3 right now. If you want to rent it, come here immediately. If you've got the nerve, come. After finishing the call, Lin Fan stood up happily and said to the mother and child, they agreed. Wait here a moment, I'll come over to negotiate the rental for you. Then he hurried off and shut the door. The woman hadn't expected Lin Fan to be that crazy. She stammered after him, what, wait, hey. Cut back to the rooftop of building number 3. After ending his call with Lin Fan, old Chen was furious. Someone asked, Chen, what's wrong with you? He replied, some idiot suddenly started harassing me. The man put his arm around old Chen. The two rose and walked off in another direction. He leaned in and whispered, ignore that guy. Come with me for a moment, I have something to tell you. The man in the black suit whispered to old Chen, I've thought it over, our supplies will only last you and me for a month. At that, old Chen cut in, you mean? The man in the vest glanced toward the group in the distance and quietly told old Chen, there are 15 people here in total, 4 of them elderly. I say we kill that group to save on rations. Old Chen, somewhat uneasy, replied, if we kill them openly it won't be right. Besides, the food they've had these past few days was saved up by that elderly couple. The man in the black suit revealed a sinister smile. Chen, leave this to me. Once we finish off those old men, we'll deal with the other men, and the remaining women will be ours. He then turned his attention to the young, fragile girls in the opposite corner. They were very anxious and hungry. The two of them immediately revealed their cruel, scheming faces. Old Chen grinned triumphantly, his smile stretching to his ears as he said, you're right, keeping those pretty girls is a clever idea. After all, no one knows when the apocalypse will end. Holding them for a bit of entertainment is acceptable. At Lin Fan's place, he was riding his bicycle toward old Chen's location based on the directions he'd been given. Many zombies chased him along the way, but Lin Fan seemed unfazed and even mocked them for being slow. His strength had reached level 40, making him incredibly strong. His stamina was 15, fairly high, and his speed was 15, within the normal range. Wherever Lin Fan went, he amazed the survivors in the taller buildings because he dared to go out onto the streets in such chaotic times. Those up above kept warning him not to do anything so reckless if he didn't want to die. And Lin Fan, for his part, still preferred to ride his bike because it was more convenient. Soon he arrived at the International District, as old Chen had said. This area was more spacious and nicer than the neighborhood where he lived. When Lin Fan looked back, he could no longer see the horde of zombies that had been chasing him. They probably couldn't keep up because he had moved so fast. On the rooftop, old Chen and his close associate were preparing to carry out a plan to kill the elderly. The two were manipulating the young people's minds, directing them at the only 4 elderly people up here. The elderly man and woman, who had been the owners of the food supplies these people had been eating for the past few days, were named Wang Zhongguo, a discharged soldier, and Su Gaifan, a discharged military medic. Seeing the young group gather, they understood the youngsters intended to kill them, so they whispered about it and accepted the possibility of sacrificing themselves if their friends turned on them. Mrs. Zhou Ajun, a retired military-industrial specialist who was sitting near them, also spoke up. Wang, you really are magnanimous. These older people did not hold grudges about the young wanting to kill them. Instead, they accepted the sacrifice because they hoped the younger generation could save the world. Old Mrs. Liang Yan, a retired teacher whose husband was very weak, whispered into his ear, I've suffered so many years, do I need to worry about suffering a little more? Her husband, barely clinging to life, smiled and accepted his fate. I'm truly sorry to have made you suffer. Old Chen cheerfully said to the man beside him, Zio, you really are clever. Zio, pleased, complimented old Chen in return. What are you saying? It's all thanks to brother Chen's brilliant leadership. Zio's face now revealed a sinister expression. He was plotting that after eliminating the elderly, he would move on to the younger people and, finally, old Chen, so that he would be the last one standing. Before the young people could get close, old Wang Zhongguo stepped forward and said, I know what you intend. He spoke bluntly and clearly. I understand your intentions. You don't need to push us downstairs. That will affect you psychologically later. Let us elderly go back to our rooms and accept death. As for the supplies, feel free to use them. We won't touch them. Even though the old people had said that, a young woman inside suddenly thought differently. She insisted they couldn't let those people go downstairs. If they opened a door below and let the zombies up here, everyone would die, and when the others heard how reasonable that sounded, they quickly went along with it. Suddenly, someone started pounding loudly on the rooftop door. Chen, are you there? The group turned toward the sound coming from the door. It was Lin Fan shouting, Chen, I'm the one who called you. I want to rent your house. Old Chen couldn't believe it. Suspecting someone was trying to deceive him, he barked, Who are you? Before the group could open the door, Lin Fan kicked it hard, breaking it right there. Revealed in front of everyone, Lin Fan was flustered and apologized. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I didn't realize your door was so loose. Zio pulled the old man close and whispered into old Chen's ear, plotting. Brother Chen, why don't we just agree to let him rent the place, then wait for a chance to push him down and take those other old people out at the same time? If he sees zombies, he'll run, and we can lure the zombies elsewhere. Then we'll be safe here. The plan is perfect. Old Chen turned and glanced at Zio with a self-satisfied smile. Good idea, kid. The two men exchanged knowing looks. Lin Fan stepped forward and asked, Excuse me, who here is Mr. Chen? The man surnamed Chen raised his hand and agreed. Fine, I'll rent the house to you. Go ahead and take it. Lin Fan pulled a wad of cash from his pocket, handed it to Mr. Chen and said, I only have 5,000 yuan that I received not long ago. Take this as a deposit for now. I'll transfer the rest to you later. Old Chen felt a nagging headache at those words. Was this guy insane? For now we have to carry out the plan, Old Chen then said. All right, stay as long as you need. Now go on. Lin Fan waved happily and left, thanking them profusely, but suddenly he noticed something. He turned to an elderly man and asked, Excuse me, are you Wang Zhongguo? Old Wang Zhongguo immediately replied, You know me. Lin Fan, beaming and clearly thrilled, hurried over to the old man and, sounding like someone who had admired him for ages, exclaimed that he'd seen him on television, that the old man had once traveled abroad to lock down weapon technologies, personally leading the team through countless technical challenges and making their country extremely proud. The old man replied cheerfully, Haha, you're too kind, it's all in the past now. Then Lin Fan put on a worried look, turned to the group of elderly people and asked, Do you all want to leave the rooftop? It's very dangerous out there. The old man smiled and gently explained that they wanted to leave so the younger people would have the food. They were all old now and would likely die anyway. Hearing that, Lin Fan seemed to see through the selfishness of the younger group's plan, and anger spread across his face. Chen, seeing Lin Fan's expression, began to panic and grow fearful. From that outward look alone, he and Zio were shaking. At that moment, Lin Fan cheerfully told the elders, Come with me, stay at my place. It's fairly safe there, and I think my home can protect you. But the seniors, worried about causing him trouble, declined. Afterward, he kept speaking in an innocent, upbeat way. Just move into my block. I'll find a way to talk to the landlord for everyone. I may look like this, but I'm capable, so don't worry and just follow me. They had just begun to have a little faith in Lin Fan. After hearing his words, the old people's faces went ashen and they all froze. Rent a house? This kid is something else, ha ha ha. Yet Lin Fan even personally pulled the elders along. He cheerfully said, Don't hesitate any longer, everyone, follow me. At that moment, old Chen saw this and cried out, Wait. But Zio tugged his sleeve and said, Chen, just leave them be. Old Chen turned to look at Zio in surprise, then said, Let's carry on with the plan we discussed. He then revealed a savage grin and malicious intent, whispering to old Chen, Isn't it better this way? When those people come downstairs, I'll lure the zombies in, and then we'll slaughter them all at once along with that lunatic. After Lin Fan led the elderly out of the building, suddenly a number of things were thrown down at them from above, causing a loud commotion. He looked up in the direction of the group hurling things at them, not understanding why. The people up there were frantically attacking the elderly below under the orders of Chen and Zio. The elderly here could no longer tolerate the young people's arrogance and were growing increasingly angry. Despite the others throwing many objects down, Lin Fan shot them a fierce look and said, It's worse than people think. Only then did old man Zhangguo discover the group's belongings and say that they intended to create a loud noise to attract the zombies here to wipe us out. Mrs. Liang Yan's elderly husband suddenly trembled. Does anyone else sense that something's wrong? When they looked back, they were terrified. Every zombie on the street had been killed by someone, leading the elderly to think someone had set up a large killing machine here. Then the elders began to piece things together. Wait a minute, could it be? All eyes turned to Lin Fan. He awkwardly scratched his head and, smiling, tried to brush it off. Don't look at me like that, I had no choice. If I didn't kill them, how could I get up to the roof? Hearing Lin Fan's nonchalant words, the elderly were stunned, more afraid of him than of the zombies. What worried them now wasn't why he killed the zombies, but where he found the strength to kill so many. On the other side, although the group of young people had thrown a lot of items down below, there was still no sign of any movement down there. Seeing everyone a bit confused, Old Chen intervened. What are you doing? Let me take a look. When he looked down, Old Chen's face twisted in panic and horror. Unexpectedly, right beside him, a man surnamed Xiao suddenly threw a young man down to the floor below. Even Old Chen was stunned and terrified of this Xiao. He said that if noise doesn't attract the zombies, then only fresh human blood will. Immediately after, the group felt that Xiao was right. Old Chen even praised him, saying only Xiao was sensible. Down below, suddenly a body fell right behind Lin Fan, and everyone stared over in bewilderment. The loud noise, combined with the strong smell of blood, quickly lured the starving zombies over. Upstairs, those people saw that the zombies had surrounded Lin Fan's group and grew excited. Everyone was pleased that their plan had worked. The elderly began to panic and fear. Poor things, sweat streamed down their faces. Lin Fan remained extremely calm. He asked old Zhangguo whether he had a car, and the old man said he did, but it was in the garage. Lin Fan immediately turned and smiled, excited. Having a car was good. He only worried his bicycle wouldn't be able to carry everyone here. So Lin Fan quickly left. He had carefully instructed the old men and women to follow his directions and bring the car to that spot, since he needed to go handle a few things first. Seeing Lin Fan rush forward like that, the elderly couldn't bear it. They volunteered to let him escape while they lured the zombies away. But this was stopped by the old women. They believed Lin Fan must have a plan and was very clear-headed, so they should just do as he said. Before long, Lin Fan had run back to the main door where the zombies were being held back. Lin Fan was getting tired of waiting for them. He'd been running over here for quite a while. Old Chen, from his observation, realized that the zombies hadn't gotten inside yet and that Lin Fan had already come out to the door to wait for them. While Xiao didn't notice and kept thinking Lin Fan had something wrong with his brain. Seeing Lin Fan's actions, Old Chen was even more convinced he was insane. He laughed and said, "Ha ha, Xiao was right, this guy's gone mad," even opening the door to let the zombies in himself. But when he turned back to look, Old Chen couldn't see Lin Fan anywhere, and that Xiao was certain Lin Fan had run off. Suddenly his face went pale and he jumped in shock, unable to utter a sound. Then both Old Chen and Xiao were terrified when they realized Lin Fan was luring the zombies toward them. From the upper floor looking down, Lin Fan led the zombies as they surged en masse through the building's main entrance. In a very short time, Lin Fan had reached the rooftop door. The young people there ran out cursing. "What are you doing?" He waved cheerfully at them, saying, "Weren't you trying to lure the zombies here? I'm just giving you a hand, no need to thank me." After that, Lin Fan stepped aside to let the group of zombies rush in. They, in their many gruesome forms, jostled one another as they chased the scent of human flesh. Old Chen and a few young men who conspired to harm innocent elderly people must now pay a heavy price. They have nowhere to run. He yelled, "You bastard.